Hi everybody, Peter here, Thailand bound. Thanks for joining me for another video today. Okay, so I'm going to do something quite off the cuff today, something a little bit different. This isn't really my area, but I've met a guy online. He's quite an interesting guy. He's a guy called Michael Parrott, and he runs an organization, a kind of charitable organization, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and I'll ask him some questions as we're going along. But what, you know, the stories that I upload to YouTube, these relationship videos, and as far as I was concerned, they were just entertainment. Guys sent me the stories, they're entertainment. But apparently, you know, some people do watch them and it does actually help them. I didn't know this until I spoke to Michael. I'm going to bring Michael into the stream now. He'll introduce himself, and I think the first question I'm going to ask Michael, I'll ask you the question before you start speaking, but let me just turn you on so everybody can see you. So there's Michael there. He should pop up in a second. And what I'd like to ask you, Michael, so you're running this organization. Your description is a non-profit organization that is dedicated to the victims of international marriage fraud. And before you answer that, you did say in one of your messages to me, and I found this quite interesting, because a lot of people say to me, oh, I'm never going to go to Thailand because it's just a scam country. And it really isn't. It happens all around the world. But one thing you said to me, which I've put down here, in fact, people watching your videos might get the idea that Thailand is the world epicenter of the problem, but it is not at all. We have far more cases from the Philippines, Brazil, West Africa, India, Pakistan, Russia, Ukraine, and Indonesia than we do from Thailand. And so I suppose the first question I'm going to ask you really is, when did you found this charity, and what got you into it actually?
Well, that's quite an interesting story, and I didn't found it. I fell into it. About 12 years ago, I got involved in lobbying against some proposed legislation here in the state of Maryland, proposed by some women in the state legislature, that was going to require residents of the state of Maryland, which would predominantly be men, to register and to be fingerprinted before they went on online dating sites to communicate with foreign women.
Oh, wow.
From an American standpoint, this has many legal and cultural problems. So I jumped in. I have some law students and some other interns in my company that we like to do fun projects that aren't involved in the commerce aspect of the business. And we jumped in, and within weeks we had Google and Facebook and Twitter, as well as some of the more larger Russian wife sites, and just a very interesting group of people and a lot of money fighting this, and ended up stripping the bill of all of these onerous provisions.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people around the country and even around the world saw this and didn't understand, you know, why a guy in the motorcycle apparel business, what was the angle? Did I have a foreign wife? Did I have some other business interests? And I was invited to Washington to go meet a bunch of these groups that worked on similar kind of issues. And a lot of people wanted me to help out because of the success we'd had in killing this legislation. And the most interesting group was this group of people that had these foreign spouses that had used the immigration system to basically acquire a green card, permanent residency, and eventually a citizenship. And it was just fascinating. And so we put our focus on that for a few years, and then the founder of the company sort of retired and handed off the entire organization to us, and we just ran with it from there.
And so how do you actually get the word out there, what you're doing? And are you mainly focused on kind of the US, or is it, well, I would imagine it's a worldwide problem. You've said it's a worldwide problem. How deep into it?
It's a worldwide problem, but it's predominantly the worst problem is for English-speaking countries, for the victims to live in, and then the perpetrators can come from almost any country, including other English-speaking countries. We get the word out in many different ways. We lobby in Washington, D.C. We do a lot of press releases. We have quite a large Facebook presence and other social media. It's a fairly unusual activity. So if someone Google searches marriage fraud, or there's not really any groups out there to help people with this. So, we get people from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Scotland, as long as they're English speaking. We don't have the capability to speak languages other than English. No. If we did, we probably get them from India. Has a problem with this too, but if they don't speak English, there's not much we could do. But that gives us a big play.
Yeah, I mean, without putting any advertisement into this stream, because we're not advertising any products here. I do know that you run quite a successful. You're not selling motorcycles, but everything to do with motorcycles, gloves, helmets, that sort of thing. And it just seems strange, because any business I've had in the past, or friends, it just engulfs you. You just don't have any spare time you want to spend with a family, or just kicking back. And it just surprises me that you can run this worldwide company and still have time to do this charity, because you've got students, interns, haven't you, that you come into this?
Yep. Well, I don't have a family, and I work all the time. I'm a workaholic, and I work at night, and I work long hours. So, and I've always done this my entire life. I always find time to do anything I'm interested in. And for the students, to come and work in the apparel business and on the commercial side of it, they learn some things. But especially the foreign students that are coming from different countries, we're trying to give them a very interesting experience, learn a little bit about law and culture. And this is just the stories you hear from our side are bizarre and crazy, as you well know from the stories you tell on your channel. So it's a very interesting break from the routine of designing safety apparel for motorcycle racing, and it makes the internship more valuable and more interesting. And for sure, when I talk to students 5, 10, even 15 years after they're gone, those are the things they remember, going down Capitol Hill and going down there with some of the victims and talking to congressmen and senators, and them relaying their story of what happened to them.
How do you help guys? Say you get your typical semi-retired or retired guy. He goes to a country like the Philippines or Thailand, meets the girl of his dreams, what he thinks is the girl of his dreams, and she's basically scamming him. I mean, how would you help somebody like that?
Well, it really depends on where they're at on the time frame. I mean, has this already happened to them in the past, and they're just trying to find some people to talk to and maybe get over the pain and hurt of it? Has the spouse already recently moved out, and that they're not divorced yet, there's still legal proceedings going on? Or is it something that's actually engaged? The person's still living with them, but they have a sense something's going off the track. The problem is for these English-speaking countries is they all have very similar domestic violence laws, which have been made more and more and more loose and aggressive. So they can be triggered basically just on someone's word. And this is probably the most helpful thing that we can do to people, is if they're at the point where this has not happened yet, or this just happened, is to give them advice of what to do and what not to do, so they don't make the situation worse than it already has been, because it can not only be very expensive, but they can end up in jail. Even if it's for a night or two, it's not a helpful thing on their resume in the future. It's also psychologically pretty damaging when you've done all this work to bring someone in from a foreign country, and then you find out they've scammed you, never cared for you, and you end up with a criminal record or an arrest record at the very least.
So I can understand how it would work for you in the States, you being in the States, but how does it work for somebody from another country? I mean, how do you help people from other countries? Most of the stories that I talk about have been sent in to me, or the ones I've had experience with. I lived in Thailand for a lot of years and I've witnessed them myself. But for instance, if a guy in the UK or France or somewhere like that had this experience, he went to a country like, I say, like Philippines, Thailand, something like that, met a girl and, sent her money and all the rest of it to buy a house, whatever they do. And then he finds out like she's skipped with his money, and he can't trace her basically. How do you get involved in that, or is there nothing you can do at that point?
If they're never been married, because a lot of your stories, the main difference to me isn't anything about Thailand. It's that a lot of your stories, the people haven't married the woman. It's more of a girlfriend scam. And that is we can give a lot of practical advice. But the legal or the specialty advice that we give is for someone that has either is bringing someone in on a fiancé visa, or has actually married them, or is in the process of divorcing them. Those are the areas where we can give the most help. But just like
go on, sorry.
Just like in your channel, most of most of the tips that you're giving to guys in these channels is to look out for these red flags with constant stories. My mom needs an operation, my brother's car payment. These are universal things. They're not Thailand things. Every country in the world, you see this happening. And when I first got involved in it, practically more than half, maybe 3/4, were all coming out of Russia and former Soviet countries. So, out of 10 cases, 6 or 7 of them were out of Russia or the former USSR. It has moved around over the years, but Thailand, while represented, was never in the top 10 of the countries.
So in your opinion, it's quite low in Thailand, actually. Somebody who watches my channel, who subscribed, and they watch all these stories, they're going to think, it's the worst country in the world. And, I don't think it is. And from talking to you, I mean, in your opinion, which country is the worst in the world for it? Or isn't there a single country that you could sort of highlight and say, if you go there, it is really bad?
It changes over time, because this is a problem that is a combination of female biology because it does in the US. It's now a big problem for American women with foreign husbands, and we work with a lot of them. But the way it happens is totally different. There's never stories of American women going to Thailand or Russia and meeting their husband. They're meeting them because there's millions of people here on work visas, on tourist visas, on student visas. They meet them while they're in the US and marry them. Then the man does the exact same thing to them the women do. I mean, Thailand for sure has a problem. I'm just saying it's not like top 10, whether it's top 15 or 20, I'm not exactly sure. It's definitely, over the years, we get a few cases every single year from Thailand, but they're not the predominant problem. In the early days, which was like 20 years ago, when these laws started this problem, like I said, Russia and all the former Soviet republics, the Russian-speaking countries, were by far the biggest problem. Now in the US, what we're seeing, the biggest problem is coming from Central Asia, India, Pakistan. After those areas, of course, you have a huge population. You have 1.4 billion people in India, like 4 million in Pakistan. So just by the numbers, they're high. We're also seeing a lot of problem out of West Africa, the countries where traditionally you would see like the wire scams and other kinds of scams out of Nigeria and those kind of areas. But there's no place where it doesn't exist. I've seen foreign spouses come in from the UK, France, and Canada, and it's just baffling to think how someone from a wealthy, educated Western country would pull something like this to try to get into the United States or to get into the UK or Canada, because there's plenty of legal means. It's not that hard for an American or a British person or Australian to get into each other's countries. So you get a certain kind of narcissistic, psychopathic person that is involved in these things oftentimes.
So what you're saying is, for instance, in the UK, when these guys fall in love with these girls and believe it's a real girlfriend, and they part with money and property, and they lose everything or a lot of their money. Some guys don't lose everything, they get burnt a little bit and they've learnt their lesson. But what you're saying, because in the UK, what happens is guys go on vacation holiday to places like Pattaya in Thailand, and they have the opportunity to meet these girls who are completely different to anywhere else in the world. They're charming. They're very skilled at what they do. They've been groomed very well by their peers. They have a lot of experience. They have a lot of victims under their belt, so they know what they're doing. The difference with those girls is that, as I say, they're very, very charming, and a lot of guys will fall under their spell. So the question I wanted to ask you, because a lot of guys write into my channel, every Saturday when I put these stories out, people will leave comments and they'll say, how could that guy be a mug? How could that guy be so stupid? Would you do it in your own country? So here's a guy who's educated, maybe he's had his own business, he's doing fairly well. He goes out to Thailand. So he's a sensible guy, he's not silly. And then he meets up with one of these girls, and she's a farm girl, no formal education, and he's educated. So how is she able to manipulate him into parting with his money? And that's the question I get over and over and over again. Either they don't believe it and say I've made the story up, or they say, how could the guy be so stupid? It just wouldn't happen. So where you are, those guys who don't go to Thailand and this doesn't happen, the guys where you say foreign women are coming into America for whatever reason and they hook up with these guys and the guys fall for the same sort of scams, why are they falling for it where you are?
Well, what I would say is that those guys, people leaving those comments there, just really haven't looked around and just seen the reality of the battle of the sexes. Because to me, it's not only not a Thailand problem, it's not even a poor country problem. Because I can come to, through all the years of doing this, through tangential things, become very involved in all kinds of family law issues and divorce issues and child custody in Australia and the UK and the US. And if you gave me 5 minutes, I could leave my house, or 5 minutes out of your house, or 5 minutes out of Sydney, Australia, and I could find British, Australian, American men that have been screwed over just this much by wives in their local community that are their own citizenship. It's a male-female issue. It's a thing that happens to men when they think they find that one and only, that special one, and it's a self-delusional process. I'm not saying that as an insult. It's just part of the chemistry of mating and of falling in love. And when that happens, people don't see things that other people are looking at. I've heard some of your stories where, you know, other friends, people are watching and telling the person something's wrong, there's a red flag, watch out. The person doesn't listen. They just go full speed ahead. But it's not a Thai issue. It happens in every country with every race and ethnicity and religion. And it's a male-female biological thing. Pattaya is maybe just concentrates it all, because all those girls come out of Isan and they all, Pattaya has such a high concentration of it. But that general problem is happening everywhere in the world. It's not unique. Pattaya is maybe unique only because it just concentrates it all in one relatively small city. That's all.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but it does. There is another side of the coin. Here in the UK, there's quite a big. I watched a documentary a few months ago, but there's these women who are on English women who are, you know, maybe 40 to 55, and they go to these African countries or places like Egypt, and they meet these young boys. You know, they might be 50, and these boys are 22, 24, and they, you know, supposedly fall in love. And what happens? It's the same thing. The boy gets here from one of these African countries or Egypt, and surprise, surprise, once he gets his passport from being married to this lady, he'll disappear. You know, and it happens a lot here in the UK to women, not only to men. Is that something that happens much over where you are?
Well, yeah. When I started, that's the whole reason I got into it. The reason I got into it 12 years ago is I saw that there was more and more female American, British, Canadian, Australian citizens who were becoming the victim of their male foreign husbands. And this was a lot more sympathetic to the politicians, because what I saw going down with these groups when they first invited me is I went down with a group of maybe 6 men that had foreign wives that had scammed them, and 1 woman. And they all had the same story. The woman's story was not close to being the worst story. It was maybe in the middle of the story. And we spent like 2 days going through Capitol Hill talking to congressmen and senators. And I talked to these people at lunchtime, and I said, you know, the politicians, whether they're left or right, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, they're way more sympathetic to when Lena is telling her story than any of the men, even though her story is exactly the same. And again, it's a biological thing.
Yeah, sure.
So I set out for lobbying purposes, female victims, because for lobbying purposes, it gets a lot more attention. Back in the office, we work with anybody. We now, because of the laws now, we now have same-sex people. Yes, you have gay and lesbian people where they have a foreign spouse where they're doing it to them. So it's quite an interesting political and economic challenge. We live in a country that's wealthy, educated, low crime, is a desirable place to live, then pretty much this can happen, because people don't want to wait in line for 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the immigration process.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, what's interesting for me is what you told me about Thailand. I've never thought Thailand was a big scam country. I mean, people, when I tell these stories, they'll say, I did want to ask you a question about these stories and what we were talking about the last time, but some people, not many, but some people assume that I've got some kind of a problem with girls in Thailand, or I don't like Thailand, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, I've been going, over 30 years now. I love Thailand. I love the culture. I love the people. And this is a very, very small part of it. And like you quite rightly said, Thailand's very low down the list for this kind of thing happening. It's just because it's concentrated in one area in a town like Pattaya, and, with people like me making videos, it doesn't help, does it? And I always make a big deal of, if I'll get a comment, people will say, oh, I'd never got to Thailand, all Thai girls are out to rip you off or something. And I always make a distinction, a big deal. And, and I try to say, look, not all Thai girls, most decent Thai girls, they don't do things like this. This is a small percentage of girls who work in go-go bars and massage parlors. I just think it's what people find very, very surprising is that when they go into these bars, they know what they do for a living. I don't want to say the word here on YouTube, but how they earn their money. These guys know what they do, but yet they fall in love, try to make them girlfriends and trust them and give them money. It kind of does become a little bit unbelievable.
And I see this all over the world in every country, not Thailand. But I think when I was watching all your videos, doing a massive watch when I was locked up in quarantine, binge watching in alternative state quarantine, and I would hear you talk about that. My thought was, what I would want your viewers to realize is they shouldn't think, oh, maybe this is a problem in Thailand, so therefore I'm going to go to the Philippines or Vietnam or Indonesia or something else instead, because this problem is an everywhere problem. This problem exists anywhere. They need to keep their guard up and look for these red flags, because it's a biological problem that's based in millions of years of evolutionary mating strategies, and there's no place in the world, including their own hometown, where they're not going to get into problems if they don't sort of be more aware of just of the male-female relationships. It's like you said. I mean, they go in and these girls are working girls, and they get attached to them, and in their mind somehow they're going to convert them. And I don't care if it's Brazil or Thailand or Russia or anywhere. That's never going to work.
The other thing is, well, you've got to think of some of the guys that go there. They're not all. I was going to say switched on. Not all. They're not. A lot of them are not stupid. There was a school teacher. I told a story of a school teacher who basically lost everything. Now he was a very educated man, but the thing is, he wasn't streetwise. And people will sometimes say to me, I mean, I'm not an expert on it. I'm telling other people's stories, so it's not like I'm the guru on bar girls. But people just keep asking the question, how could they be so stupid? And the thing is, what I try to say to some people, sometimes guys have come out of a terrible, terrible relationship. They haven't been with a partner for a number of years. They're very lonely. They might have mental health problems, and they go on the internet. They've tried internet dating. They've met women with chips on their shoulders, and they just, they're not in a great state of mind. They get out there, and as I said, these girls they know how to make guys feel like $1 million. And I think it's, if you haven't been there and you haven't experienced, it's very easy to condemn. But there's two sides to every coin.
Well, yes, and the other thing is that people make the mistake of thinking there's any connection between education and intelligence and the ability to understand women and deal with these problems. Look at Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, look at John Cleese. These are all incredibly successful, very smart people that are getting just been wiped out in marriage and divorce. In John Cleese's case, several times over. He's an incredibly brilliant man. So being educated and smart is not. This is a psychological issue of the way that males and females interact. And if you have a certain personality where you have this kind of trusting, or you fall in love and then you're blind to everything, you're going to have a problem. I don't care if you have 5 doctorate degrees and your IQ is Einstein's. It's not a problem of intelligence or education.
So, I mean, I've got a couple more questions I'd like to ask you before we wind up. We've been going for about half an hour now. What I'd like to ask you is, when we first met online, from my perspective, these videos that I make, they're purely for kind of entertainment on one hand, and on the other hand, they can warn some guys if they've never been before and they go into a place like Pattaya. After watching the videos, they should get some tips and think, oh, hang on a minute, if I meet it'll make them think twice when they're in that situation. But you said something quite interesting, which made me laugh when you told it. And you said to me, do you realize that your videos are helping people? And I actually laughed when you told me, if you remember. So, I mean, what could you elaborate on that? Like, tell the viewers, you know, somebody who just watches these for entertainment, how does it help the people that you know that it's helped, for instance?
Everything in modern Western culture, especially in the English-speaking language, but Europe in general and Japan, everything is from a female perspective. All big companies market that way. The entire government works that way. Politicians want women's votes. Corporation wants women's money. So for men to find information to help men, they're not going to find that in a major newspaper or television show or in a school or in a university. They're going to find it from a friend or personal experience or someone like you on YouTube or something, because there's no one there to help them, because all of society is there to help women and to promote that point of view. And a lot of the things that, in order to really prevent this kind of problem from happening, you have to have a more realistic view of women that, very frankly, a lot of people in society, especially in government, don't want men to have. They'd rather just keep them sort of sleepy and doofy. And so a channel like yours really has a potential to get people to, you know, wake up and you know, what they say, you know, like take the red pill and understand the reality of life, as opposed to being in the sleepy dream world of how it would be nice and pretty and girls are sugar and spice and everything nice, and understand it is what it is, but not be negative about it. I mean, men certainly have a long list of negative qualities that are associated with being male too. To be realistic and not ever let your guard down when you see certain telltale signs, which almost every single one of your videos, hardly any of the videos is there no signs that there's a problem going on, but the people continue down the path until they reach a result that is not ideal.
Yeah, and I think that's why people, you know, write into me and say, how could the guy be so stupid? Because they watch these videos from the comfort of their home and they're like, you know, all the signs are there, like you said, but it's very difficult. It's easy to judge, to condemn, isn't it? I'd like to think if I was single, I wouldn't fall for a scam like that, but would I fall for it on the first day I'd arrived in Thailand 30 years ago? Who knows? But luckily I haven't been put in that situation. So I suppose really just a couple more things I'd like to say before we, you know, wrap it up. I just want to reiterate again about the country of Thailand from myself, and anybody who might watch my videos and think the guy's got a chip on his shoulder about Thailand. I haven't. Don't let these videos put you off, because, you know, there's normal, decent Thai girls that you can meet who are lovely, lovely women. I've got friends who are married to Thai women and they're lovely wives. And I guess my last question to you, Michael, is if somebody's in a situation, or they've had a situation, or they just want some advice, or they want to get in contact with you to kind of, you know, get some advice on how they can move forward with their lives, whichever situation they're in, are you able to help these people, or are you kind of busy with your business, or how does it work? Can people just simply write to you, or?
Well, there's two ways they can contact us. We have a Facebook community which has several thousand active members, and if people want to just jump in there, join, they just have to answer like 3 simple questions and they can sign up. Then they can talk to all the other people and ask questions to share their experiences. If they have a little bit more urgent, or maybe they're more private and they don't want to share it, they can email, and I'll usually, assuming I'm not out of the country, I'll contact them back personally.
And your Facebook group, how do they find that in Facebook? What's the
if they just go into the Facebook, just put into the Facebook magnifying glass, put victims of immigration fraud.
Victim of immigration fraud. Okay, and that's in Facebook. Okay, and I guess, guys, if you're watching this and you enjoyed what Michael's speaking about, you want to find out some more information, you can always write to me and I can pass it on to, I won't attempt to answer the email other than to say, yes, I pass it on, because I'm by no means, I'm no expert. I don't know anything about it. I'm not an agony aunt. I'm just a person who tells stories. I'm an amateur presenter, and you know, I tell stories for you to enjoy. Michael's more on the serious side of things. So there's my email address on the screen now. if you want to write to Michael or ask him a question, maybe you can send it to my email address. All I'll do is I'll forward it on to Michael's address. I've got his email address. As I say, I won't respond to you other than to say I've received your email and I've sent it on to Michael. And you know, if Michael's busy, I'm sure he will get back to you eventually. Okay. And I don't know, is there anything else you want to add before we go, Michael?
No, I just say if someone is, it's better that people reach out for help sooner than later, because when things start to tank down, it really gets out of anyone's control and becomes a real nightmare. So when you first start seeing signs, it's better to be cautious and curious and explore as much as possible early on.
I mean, you've turned a light on for me, because although I read these stories, I mean, you know, I know thousands of guys got a patter every year, and this is just a small percentage. But I didn't realise it's such a serious problem around the world. And just talking to you, it's opened my eyes up. Hopefully, somebody who, if they have their own problems, they just don't know who to talk to, who to turn to, they want to be discreet and ask somebody else. Hopefully, they'll get in touch. And it's been very, very interesting talking to you. We might have an actual live session if we can get enough people interested. So if you've enjoyed this stream and you would like to see a live stream with Michael and myself, and be able to come into the stream and ask questions, and please leave it in the comments. And if we get enough people interested, then I'll contact Michael and we'll do a live stream so you guys can come in and join in the stream, as it were. All right, so Michael, thank you very much for being a guest on this video today. It's been entertaining and very interesting.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And hopefully we'll see more of you in the future.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right.